She didn't just laugh. She leaned back in her chair and let it out, loud enough for half the courtroom to hear, like she had just been handed front-row tickets to a joke she didn't even bother to understand. And the strange thing is, nobody else laughed. Not the judge, not the clerks, not even her own attorney. Just this one sharp, cutting sound that hung in the air a second too long, the kind that makes people shift in their seats and pretend they didn't notice. Because the man she was laughing at wasn't trying to be funny. He was just standing there, wearing an old, worn-out field jacket that looked like it had seen more years than most people in that room. Boots scuffed down to the leather, posture straight, but not proud. Just steady, like someone who had learned how to stand even when standing hurt. His name wasn't anything flashy, Daniel Reeves. Most people in that room had never heard it before that day. But there was a time when that name had been written in reports, passed between officers, spoken over radios in places most of us only ever see on the news. 17 years in the Army, logistics, supply routes, the kind of work nobody notices until everything falls apart. You know how that goes. Nobody thanks the guy who makes sure the fuel gets there until it doesn't. Daniel had been that guy. And 3 years before that courtroom, he had been in a convoy outside a place most Americans couldn't point to on a map, riding in the third vehicle back, watching the road the way you do when you've seen enough to know something always goes wrong when things feel too quiet. Then it did. The explosion wasn't dramatic at first, not like in movies, just a sudden force, a violent shift in the world, heat and sound crashing together, flipping one of the fuel trucks like it weighed nothing. And then everything else came after. Fire spreading too fast, ammunition cooking off in sharp, chaotic bursts, men shouting, some of them not even words, just noise, raw and desperate. Daniel didn't think. Not really, he just moved. That's what people don't get about moments like that. It's not bravery the way people imagine it. It's habit, it's training, it's the simple refusal to stand still when someone else is burning. He ran toward the truck, dragged one man out, half-conscious, uniform already catching, dropped him behind cover, turned around, went back in. Second one, heavier, bleeding, Daniel pulling him by the straps, boots slipping on oil and ash. Third one, this one screaming, grabbing onto him like he was the last solid thing left in the world. And then, he went back again. That part always gets people when they hear it later. The fourth trip, because by then the fire had spread, the heat was unbearable, and the rounds inside the truck were starting to go off faster, sharper, closer. Someone had yelled for him to stop. He didn't. And that's when it happened. The blast didn't just knock him down. It picked him up and threw him, like the ground itself had decided it didn't want him there anymore. 20 feet, they said later. He didn't remember flying. Just the impact, the sudden silence in his own head before the pain came rushing back in like a flood. Spine damage, nerve damage, the kind of injuries that don't always show on the outside but never really leave. They gave him medals. They gave him a handshake. And then, eventually, they gave him paperwork. Medical discharge. That's how it usually ends. Not with a parade, not with closure. Just forms, signatures, and a quiet transition into a life that doesn't quite know what to do with you anymore. At first, Daniel thought he'd figure it out. Most guys do. You tell yourself you'll get a job, something simple, something steady. You don't need much, just enough to get by. But pain doesn't schedule itself. Some days he couldn't stand for long. Other days he couldn't sit. Sleep came in short, broken pieces, and the kind of jobs that say they're veteran-friendly don't always mean it when they see what that actually looks like. Bills don't wait, though. Rent doesn't pause out of respect. And slowly, things start slipping. First the apartment, then the phone, then the people. That's the part nobody warns you about. How quiet your life gets when you don't have anything left to offer that the world recognizes. He ended up sleeping in his car for a while, parked behind a grocery store that didn't bother checking too closely, curled in a position that didn't make his back feel like it was on fire. Until one morning, the car was gone. Towed overnight. No warning. Just gone. And that's how a man who once ran into a burning convoy found himself standing on a sidewalk, holding a single envelope, trying to figure out what the next move was supposed to be. Inside that envelope was a check. Military disability. Not much, but it was something. Enough to get him back on his feet, maybe a cheap room, a few meals, a start. There was a bank a few blocks away. Bright building, glass doors, The kind of place that feels like it belongs to people who still have control over their lives. Daniel stood outside for a minute, not because he didn't know what to do, but because he knew exactly what it would look like when he walked in. Still, he pushed the door open. And that's where everything really started to go wrong. The air inside that bank felt different. You ever noticed that? How some places don't just look clean, they feel like they have rules you're not supposed to break, even if nobody says them out loud. Polished floors, soft lighting, that faint scent of something expensive and artificial. Like money had its own smell, and it didn't want to mix with anything else. Daniel felt it the second he stepped in. Not fear, not exactly. More like awareness. The kind you develop after years of walking into rooms where people decide what you are before you say a word. A couple of customers glanced over. Quick, subtle, but not subtle enough. A woman tightened her grip on her purse. A man in a suit shifted slightly, like he needed just a bit more space between himself and whatever Daniel represented. Daniel didn't react. He'd seen that look before. He just walked up to the counter, pulled the envelope from his jacket, and slid the check forward. The teller, young, maybe mid-20s, froze. Not dramatically, just a pause, half a second too long, eyes flicking from the check to Daniel, then back again. One moment, she said, forcing a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. And that's when the shift happened. You could feel it before you even saw it. A presence. Confident, controlled, and just a little too loud for the space. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor as she approached, every step measured, like she had walked into situations like this before and already knew how they ended. Her name was Claire Whitmore. Branch manager. Late 30s, maybe early 40s, dressed like someone who had built her identity on being the most put-together person in any room she entered. She didn't look at the check first. She looked at Daniel. Up and down. Not quickly, either, slowly, deliberately, like she was gathering evidence. Then she gave a small smile. Not warm. Not kind. The kind of smile that already has a conclusion built into it. Sir, she said, her voice clear, practiced, just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. I'm going to have to ask you to step outside. Daniel blinked once, like he thought maybe he misheard her. I'm just here to deposit a check, he said calmly. No edge, no frustration, just a statement. Claire's smile didn't change. I understand that, she replied, tilting her head slightly. But you're making our customers uncomfortable. And there it was. Not said directly, but said clearly enough. Daniel glanced around. Nobody was speaking. Nobody was complaining. But they were watching now. Phones starting to come out, subtle at first, then not so subtle. I'm not bothering anyone, he said. Still calm. Still controlled. And for a second, just a second, there was a flicker in Claire's expression. Something like irritation. Not because he raised his voice, but because he didn't. Because he wasn't playing the role she expected. She stepped a little closer, lowered her voice just enough to sound like she was being discreet, but not enough to keep others from hearing. Sir, you smell, she said flatly. And just like that, the room shifted. You could feel the tension tighten. Someone let out a short, uncomfortable laugh. Not loud, but loud enough. Claire straightened slightly, as if that settled it. This isn't a place for people like you, she added, louder now, more confident. People like you. It's funny how much weight those 3 words can carry without ever needing to explain themselves. Daniel stood there for a moment. Not frozen, just still. And if you were watching closely, really closely, you might have noticed something change in his eyes. Not anger, not shame. Something quieter, something heavier. He picked up the check, folded it carefully, slid it back into the envelope. I'll go somewhere else, he said. That was it. No argument. No scene. No raised voice. And somehow, that made it worse. Because it denied everyone in that room the justification they were waiting for. Security had already started moving in, not aggressively, just enough to be present, to reinforce the idea that this situation had already been decided. Daniel turned and walked toward the door. Behind him, a few whispers. A couple of laughs. The soft glow of phone screens capturing a moment that, to most people there, would be nothing more than a story to tell later. But for Daniel, that moment didn't end when he walked out. It followed him, out onto the sidewalk, down the street, into the quiet spaces where things finally catch up with you. The next morning, the bank opened like nothing had happened. Same polished floors, same quiet music, same people walking in and out, carrying their lives in neat little transactions. But behind the scenes, something had already started moving. Because Daniel didn't go to another bank. He went somewhere else. A legal aid office, the kind of place that doesn't look like much from the outside, but inside, it's full of people who know how to listen. That's where he met Rachel Torres. She didn't interrupt him when he spoke, didn't rush him, didn't fill the silence with assumptions. She just listened. And when he finished, she leaned back in her chair and said something simple. That shouldn't have happened. Not dramatic, not emotional, just certain. And sometimes that's all it takes. Because what happened in that bank wasn't just about embarrassment. It wasn't just about being turned away. It was about something deeper, something quieter, something a lot harder to prove if you don't know where to look. Discrimination doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just smiles and asks you to leave. Rachel saw it, and she knew exactly what to do with it. By the time they filed the lawsuit, the bank's legal team already had their story ready. Protocol, customer comfort, disruptive presence. Words that sound reasonable until you look at them too closely. And now, sitting in that courtroom, Claire Whitmore looked exactly like someone who believed those words would be enough. She sat with one leg crossed over the other, posture perfect, expression composed, occasionally leaning toward her attorney with quiet confidence. Like this was all just a formality. Like the outcome had already been decided. And maybe, at first it felt that way. Her attorney stood, adjusted his suit, and addressed the judge with the kind of tone that comes from years of winning cases that never really felt in danger. Your Honor, my client acted within standard procedure. Mr. Reeves entered the bank in a condition that raised concern among staff and customers. The decision to ask him to leave was made to maintain a safe and comfortable environment. Safe, comfortable, clean words, carefully chosen. The judge listened, didn't interrupt, just watched. Then she leaned forward slightly. Disruptive, she said. That word was used in your filing. Can you clarify what exactly Mr. Reeves did that was disruptive? A pause. Not long, but noticeable. The attorney shifted. Well, his appearance, Your Honor. It created unease. Unease. Another soft word. Another shield. The judge nodded slowly, like she was turning something over in her mind. Then she looked at Daniel. Mr. Reeves, did you raise your voice? Refuse to comply? Cause a disturbance in any way? Daniel stood. Straight, steady, just like before. No, ma'am. That was it. No explanation. No defense. Just the truth, stripped down to its simplest form. And for a moment, the room felt uncertain. Because simple answers are hard to argue with. But Rachel, she wasn't finished. Not even close. She didn't stand immediately. Didn't rush. She reached down calmly, picked up a small remote, and turned toward the screen behind them. Your Honor, she said, her voice even, controlled. We'd like to present evidence. And that's when everything started to shift. The screen flickered to life behind them. At first, it was just grainy footage. Black and white, slightly distorted, the kind of security camera video most people don't think twice about. But then the image settled. The bank lobby. Same polished floor. Same quiet order. And then, the door opened. Daniel walked in. No dramatic music, no narration, just reality, unedited, unfolding exactly as it had happened. Rachel didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The room leaned in on its own. You could feel it, that subtle shift when people stop waiting for something interesting and start realizing something important is already happening. The footage showed Daniel approaching the counter. Calm, quiet, no sudden movements, no raised voice, no disruption. Just a man trying to deposit a check. The teller hesitating, calling someone over. And then, Claire. Even on that grainy screen, you could see it. The way she looked at him. Not confusion, not concern, judgment. Clear as day. The video had no sound at first, just the visuals, but sometimes that's enough. Body language tells the truth people try to hide with words. Then Rachel pressed something, and the audio came in. A little crackly, but unmistakable. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step outside. A few heads in the courtroom shifted. People who had been sitting comfortably before suddenly weren't. Daniel's voice followed. I'm just here to deposit a check. Simple. Polite. Exactly like he said it had been. And then, Claire again. You're making our customers uncomfortable. A faint murmur in the room. Someone in the back let out a quiet, wow, before catching themselves. But the clip didn't stop. Rachel let it play. Because the next part. That was the part nobody could explain away. Sir, you smell. There it was. No context. No legal framing. No polished language. Just raw, unnecessary cruelty. And then the line that seemed to land harder than anything else. This isn't a place for people like you. The video froze. Right there. On Claire's face. Confident. Certain. Completely unaware of what that moment would become. Rachel clicked the remote. The screen went black. And for a second, nobody spoke. Not the judge. Not the attorneys. Not even Claire. Because now, there was nothing left to reinterpret. No room for protocol. No space for misunderstanding. Just the truth, sitting in the middle of the room where everyone could see it. The judge removed her glasses slowly, set them down on the bench, and looked directly at Claire. And when she spoke, her voice wasn't loud. But it didn't need to be. "Ms. Whitmore," she said, "do you dispute that this footage accurately represents your conduct?" Claire opened her mouth, then closed it again. Because what do you say to something like that? You can't argue with your own voice. You can't cross-examine your own reflection. "No, Your Honor," her attorney said quietly, stepping in before she could. And that's when Rachel moved again, because she still wasn't done. "Your Honor," she said, "we have one more piece of evidence we'd like to submit." A folder. Simple. Unremarkable. Until it wasn't. She walked it up, handed it to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. The courtroom watched, not with curiosity anymore, but with anticipation. Because now they knew. Whatever came next mattered. The judge opened the file. Her eyes moved across the page. Once. Then again. Slower this time. And something changed in her expression. Not shock. Not exactly. Something heavier. Something that carried weight. She looked up. "Ms. Whitmore," she said carefully. "Are you familiar with the name Michael Whitmore?" Claire blinked. Just once. That was her husband's name. "Yes," she said, her voice quieter now, uncertainty creeping in. "That's my husband." The judge nodded. Then she lifted the document slightly. "This is a sworn statement from him." And just like that, the air in the room changed. Not gradually. All at once. Because now, this wasn't just about what happened in a bank. Now it was about something bigger. Something personal. The judge continued. "He states that 3 years ago, during a convoy incident overseas, his vehicle was struck by an explosive device. Daniel didn't move. Didn't look up. Didn't react. But you could feel it. The tension. The connection forming before it was even spoken. He further states," the judge went on, "that he was trapped in that vehicle, unable to escape, until another soldier entered the burning wreckage and pulled him to safety." Claire's face started to change. Not dramatically, just slowly. Like something inside her was trying to catch up with what she was hearing. The judge lowered the paper slightly. And then she said it. That soldier was Mr. Daniel Reeves. Silence. Not the kind from earlier. This wasn't discomfort. This was impact. Real, undeniable, irreversible impact. Claire's posture broke first. Just slightly. Her shoulders dropping. Her composure cracking in a way no argument could fix. Because now, this wasn't about perception anymore. This wasn't about how Daniel looked. This was about what he had done. For her. For her family. For the man she went home to every night. And somehow, she hadn't seen it. Hadn't even considered it. The judge leaned forward. "So let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said, her voice steady but sharper now. "You publicly humiliated a disabled veteran who, by your own husband's testimony, saved his life." She paused, just long enough, because he appeared to be beneath your standards. No one moved. No one spoke. Because there was nothing left to say. The verdict didn't take long. It never does, when the truth is that clear. The ruling came down firm. Discrimination. Damages awarded. 6 figures. A formal, public apology required from the bank. But oddly enough, that wasn't the part people remembered. It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the legal win. It was what happened after. Outside the courthouse, reporters were already waiting. Cameras. Microphones. That low hum of anticipation that comes when a story has just crossed from private to public. Daniel stepped out. Same jacket, same quiet presence. Nothing about him had changed. Except now, people were looking at him differently. Not with suspicion. Not with discomfort. With recognition. One reporter stepped forward. "Mr. Reeves," she called out, "what are you going to do now?" It was a simple question. The kind people ask expecting a bigger answer. Plans. Statements. Maybe even something inspiring. Daniel paused for a second. Looked at her. Then at the camera. And when he spoke, He didn't try to make it sound important. "I think," he said slowly, "I'm just gonna sleep indoors tonight." That was it. No speech. No victory lap. Just honesty. And somehow, that hit harder than anything else. Because it reminded everyone watching how low things had gotten, and how little it actually takes to start feeling human again. The clip spread fast. Millions of views in days. People sharing it, commenting, arguing, debating. Some called it justice. Some called it too little, too late. Some focused on Claire, others on the system, others on the quiet way things like this happen every day without a camera to catch them. But there was one detail that didn't get as much attention as it should have. People watched the video. They reacted to it. They talked about it. But most of them never stopped to ask what happened next. Not really. Because stories like this, they don't end in courtrooms. They don't wrap up neatly after a verdict. They keep going in quieter ways. In smaller moments. In choices people make when nobody's recording. So here's the question, and I want you to actually think about it before you scroll away. Was this justice? Or was it just a moment where the truth got lucky enough to be seen? And more importantly, how many Daniels walk into rooms every day and don't get that second chance? Let me know what you think. Because this isn't just his story anymore. It's ours.